Maya's camera sequencer is a really cool previs tool that you can use to set up nonlinear edits between your cameras and see what a final edit will look like. You can't batch render from it, which makes its usefulness for anything outside of previs pretty questionable. It's a very cool tool. It's worth using just to set things up interactively in Maya, so you don't have to wait on renders, check them out in an editor and see how they look. So this will definitely help speed up the process of picking your camera angles, picking your edit times, and all that kind of thing. But it falls a little short because you can't batch render from it. At any rate, let me show you how it works. First thing you want to do is have a few cameras that you want to switch between. I'll just go ahead and show you what our views look like. We have this low shot here, and it's just a wide angle lens on that thing. So if you wanted to change that, you just have to change your focal length here. So I change it from the default 35 down to 10, which makes it a really wide angle lens. Looks like I have a master shot, which is just the whole scene is captured from this static camera. And then I have a tracking shot where it just follows along in a relatively smooth way. And if you set up animated cameras, just make sure that you have relatively sparse animation curves so that things interpolate really smoothly. You're going to have to go in and tweak out your curves, just make sure that everything looks nice and smooth. It's very easy to make jarring and unsettling cameras in CG. Okay, so those are the three cameras I want to switch between. So I'll go to Window, Animation Editors, and then the Camera Sequencer. So in the camera sequencer, it looks a lot like the tracks editor. You have to define shots. So you can click here to create a shot, and that's actually going to use these options. So I'd recommend just going into the options and setting up some options first before you use that button. So I'll go ahead and set up a shot here. So I'll just make the first one low and wide, and set my camera to low and wide. The start and end time are totally changeable. You know, it doesn't really matter. You can leave this at 24. You can make it longer or shorter, or whatever you want. It's easy to move those things around later. But that's the time that's actually down here that's been animated, and you'll see how that's different than sequencer time. It's going to place that at the current time, which is set to 24 here, but notice down here it's set to 1. These two timelines do not align with each other, and this current frame is actually referring to this, what this says in here. So I want that to be 1. So I'll just set that back to 1 there. And we don't really need a reference image right now, so I'm just going to leave that blank as well. Incidentally, you can stack shots before and after other shots if you already have an edit going, but for us right now, we'll just set them all up at 1. So I'll go ahead and do that, click apply, and it doesn't do anything. It gives me an error, unable to parse the argument list. Yeah, thanks Maya. You know, like, can you give me some normal human language to understand? Like, basically what's happening here is it's not able to make this because there's a space in the name. Normally Maya will add an underscore, as you can see here, camera underscore, low and wide. But in this window, for whatever reason, it doesn't. So anything that Maya considers to be an illegal character, which is a space, a lot of the symbols, most of the symbols actually, then it will just fail. So you have to make sure your name is something without spaces, without symbols, and then you click apply and it's happy. So I just wanted to point out that one little quirky error as well, and then I'll just make the rest of these. So master, and this one maybe I'll make it the full length, and then set up tracking, set that camera to tracking, and click create shot just to close the window and make the shot. So if you incidentally, if you had the wrong camera attached here, then you can right click and just choose change camera. Easy as that. If you want to change the timing, you can move the things around, but notice there's a little bit of something quirky happening here where one set of numbers is staying the same and one is moving. It's not really quirky, it's just the way it works here. So the top numbers are the actual time from this timeline, and these numbers are the time from this timeline. So this is going to play frame 1 to 24 from this timeline, from 32 to 55 for this camera. So what that will look like is, let me go ahead and scrub here. So we'll play from the master camera, and it'll get almost up to the obstacle, and then it'll start completely over from frame 1. And notice that you can actually see that happening down here. So here I am scrubbing up, and I get to 31, and I get to 32, and it goes right back to 1. So it's just using this change what we're seeing here based on which camera you have selected. So just be aware of that. That's really cool functionality. It's not what we want in this case. What we want is to move this down probably so that we can start with the master camera and then cut into the low and wide. So to do that, you use the top numbers, which are sort of the crop numbers, and notice that both numbers change when you change the top number. So I'll move this down to somewhere else. Let's say I'm going to start it after the master camera's had a full second or something like that. So go ahead. Whoops, it got awfully huge. Thanks, Windows 7. I'll go ahead and scrub this, take a master shot, and then it switches to low and wide at frame 25, and our actual time is being preserved here. So everything's still exactly where it would be, and we're just switching cameras now. So that's a switch there, and I'll probably want to switch out of this camera somewhere around here. So I'll grab this little crop number and move that in, and occasionally you'll actually get some buggy behavior here. We'll probably see that in a minute, but if you do, then typically if you click off and then click the number again, then you won't get that. Hopefully you'll see that because it does happen quite a bit. Okay, so then we cut back to the master camera, which I might not want. I might actually want to go ahead and cut to the tracking camera. But instead of cutting out the master track to let the tracking camera show through, since I want to go to the back to the master track anyways, I'm just going to grab the tracking camera and move it up. So now tracking's on top, and I need to just change my my crop in and out. So I'll change my crop in. It doesn't matter if there's overlap here, as you've seen, like it just stays with this camera until there's nothing available, and then it goes down to the next track and sees what's there. You can mute tracks, so I can mute this and it'll switch over to the master shot instead of going to the tracking shot. But if I have that activated, then I get my tracking shot. So otherwise it uses this stacking order just like this. So I'll scrub over to here, and maybe I want to cut to the master shot here. So there's that quirkiness that I was talking about. See, I clicked the end to sort of crop it in, and I'm moving the wrong piece here. So I'm not entirely sure what's causing this error, but typically if you deselect and then click it again, it will work. So just proceed with caution on that one. And then it cuts back out here. So that looks like it's working fine. Yeah, it finishes the move in the master shot. So that's what I want my edit to look like. It could use some refining, but this will give you a sense. I'll go ahead and play it back. So now you see all those edits happen. Now a quirky thing happens here if I don't have this as my active window and I play this back. I won't see any of those switches. Like, I only see that stuff if I'm in the camera sequencer. So, and I can't batch render from here. Again, that's the major flaw of this tool. You can do a play blast from here, but you can't do a batch render, which is pretty lame actually. It would make this tool so much better if it just handled setting up a batch as well. But they've added a way to bake all this camera data down onto one new camera called an UberCam. So go create UberCam, and that spits out a new camera called the UberCam that you can see all these switches happening in the regular viewport. So I'll go ahead and minimize this. I'll switch my camera to the UberCam, and now if I play this, you actually see all those edits happening. And you can see some of the problems that happen, like the motion blur between the two camera switches. That's not really a visual artifact. It's what's happening. This camera is moving from position to position, so it does motion blur. So when we do renders or anything like that, the first frame after a switch will actually be useless. So I'll go ahead and show you what that looks like. So go to the graph editor. Go ahead and select the camera. So here you can see it's following the curves of the master shot, and then it does a change of position and orientation to match the low and wide shot, and that interpolation happens over one frame. So you don't ever see that interpolation since it's happening across one frame. It looks just like a cut. But according to what's happening in motion, this camera is actually moving a lot between these frames, which is why you get all that motion blur added in. So this is somewhat a useless camera if you're trying to do motion blur, which most of the time you will. I'll just show you what that will look like. So I'll just pull up my render view here, and this is the frame where the switch is actually happening. I'll just go ahead and render this with Mental Ray. Click render. Oh, wrong camera, so just go ahead and switch this guy to Ubercam. So this is the first frame after a camera switch. So notice that that just looks like there's nothing there. It's just a complete blur. So pretty useless if you have motion blur on. The frame before that and the frame after that would actually render just fine. So I'll just go ahead and do one of those. There you can see there's no issue after. It's just that transition frame. It's blending between where it was and where it is, and you just can't really even tell what's going on. So pretty useless. So you could turn down motion blur at your edits. So you could just match out your cut timing, move your motion blur down, and then move it back up. But then you'd have elements within your scene that are supposed to be motion blurred would be real crisp, and then they would get blurry. So it'd probably look pretty weird too. So I'd recommend using the camera switcher sequencer rather, just to sort of figure out what you want in terms of frame ranges for your cameras, and then batch render those out and just throw them together in an editor afterwards. So it's not a perfect tool, but it's really good for previs. It can definitely save you some time. So hope this helped.